President Trump says U.S. officials have arrived in North Korea to make arrangements for his summit with Kim Jong Un. Talks between the U.S. and North Korea have resumed after the president formally canceled the June 12th meeting last week. Tweeting about the summit on Sunday, President Trump said, quote, "It will happen."
Meanwhile, the president is juggling several domestic issues back in Washington. Kevin Cirilli is chief Washington correspondent for Bloomberg. He joins me now from our Washington bureau. All right, Kevin, I realize this question may be unknowable. Nevertheless, I'm going to proceed with it anyway. How confident, Kevin, should the American people be that President Trump's meeting with Kim Jong Un will take place even after the president canceled it last week?
Well, I'm not a betting man, but here's what I would say is that I think that there's widespread agreement with both Democrats and Republicans that any conversations with North Korea should be greeted with cautious optimism. It is a good sign that the president's advance team is going over there to have this meeting. Now, Democrats I speak with up on Capitol Hill, Elaine, they tell me, hey, wait a minute, this meeting was canceled because the president didn't have a cohesive strategy in terms of the negotiations with North Korea. Republicans, on the flip side of that, they praise the president for pulling out, saying that the president is now focused on a long-term denuclearization deal with North Korea as opposed to something in the short term. Either way, I think that if you look at the events over the weekend, the news that South Korea and North Korea are continuing to have their conversations should be seen as a sign that the major parties involved are still talking. And one thing that stood out from Saturday night was President Trump's slight criticism of Chinese President Xi Jinping for his involvement in what the president argues is some hijinks of getting this meeting canceled at the last minute.
And Kevin, switching gears to the domestic side, President Trump also tweeted Saturday on immigration policy. Now, he blamed Democrats for a, quote, horrible law that separates children from their parents. Republicans control the House and the Senate. Is he right to blame the Democrats at this point for what's happening at the border?
Well, look, Democrats would say absolutely not. Republicans would say that they don't have a supermajority. I think it really depends on which side you fall in. In terms of immigration, though, the president's base really feels that the president campaigned on the notion that he would bolster security along the U.S.-Mexico border, the wall. And right now, we just haven't seen the exact replication of that wall. So I think really the base of the Trump movement is still very much behind him in terms of immigration policy. We have seen some infighting kind of bubble over, the likes of Stephen Miller, who are advocating for a much more Steve Bannon-esque type of immigration policy versus some of the folks that are at the Department of Homeland Security. That's interesting because it's an illustration of the tension right now within the Republican Party. Democrats, on the flip side of that, heading into midterms, would argue that immigration policy might be a mobilizing force to get progressives to the polls to flip the House or the Senate.
So I want to follow up on that idea, Kevin. In the same tweet, President Trump said he wants, quote, catch and release, lottery and chain migration, end quote, to end as well. And he also called for construction of a proposed border wall. First of all, are those demands representative of what exactly the White House wants to see on immigration? Is there any kind of wiggle room there? And also, are all those things non-starters essentially for Democrats?
Absolutely, they're non-starters, Elaine, for Democrats. There's no way that those Democrats are going to get on board with this. Now, the president tried his hand at this, including the points that he just tweeted out within the last 24 hours a couple of months ago. Remember that bipartisan meeting at the White House in which he had a talking roundtable of sorts inside of the White House, but it really didn't lead to anything. And I'll be really blunt here. I'm looking at the calendar, the congressional calendar between now and the midterms, and I'm not sure that I see a divisive type of vote that would be able to get through between now and the midterm election day. A lot of political pundits and observers would argue that this type of rhetoric is really just some campaign rhetoric because it really is unlikely that any type of comprehensive immigration plan would be able to get done between now and the midterms. It would have to wait until next calendar year with the new Congress, and it's anybody's bet what that new congressional landscape will look like come November.
On another topic, Kevin, the president touted the deal he made on Friday to allow Chinese telecom giant ZTE to do business with the U.S. while making personnel changes and paying a large fine. What is the White House's argument in favor of this deal?
They feel that this, by allowing the telecom giant backed by Chinese government, ZTE, the fourth largest telecom company in the world, that they would be able to use it as a bargaining chip in ongoing bilateral talks between the U.S. and China. But look, if you're at home and you're like, what is ZTE? Let's explain it real quick. This is a telecom giant that is based in China that has the backing of the Chinese government. And what it does is provide types of technology for Android phones as well as other phones. But back in 2012, bipartisan consensus up on Capitol Hill was that ZTE was being used to not only funnel communications into North Korea and Iran, but also the type of surveillance that the Chinese are able to do. That has raised significant security concerns from Republicans and Democrats. The second point that I would make is that the Republican Party right now is not fully on board with what the president is doing in lifting some of the restrictions for ZTE. And in fact, they are actually out of the Senate Banking Committee proposing legislation that was approved by a Republican-controlled committee that would make it more difficult, Omar, for the president to actually lift these type of sanctions. This is a fascinating issue because it really gets to the crux of the global technology market. When I talk to folks who are affiliated with ZTE, they argue that the administration, backed by the Obama administration, really, and President Trump enacted a $1.19 billion settlement fine with ZTE, and they restructured the corporate headquarters. So they feel they've already paid the price. Keep your eye on this because it could be a potential to get linked to North Korea if the North Koreans want to denuclearize and lure in some outside global investment for infrastructure of an economy that, quite frankly, Kim Jong Un just doesn't even have.
And Kevin, this deal is getting slammed now by lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. And I want to play some of what Republican Senator Marco Rubio said Sunday on Face the Nation. Let's listen to that.
One of the things I hope Congress will do is not only not even allow Chinese telecom companies to operate in the United States. It's not just ZTE, it's Huawei. All of them depend on U.S. semiconductors. None of these companies should be operating in this country. None of them. They are used for espionage. They are part of the supply chain, whether it's routers or anything else. They embed stuff in there that could be used to spy against us, not just for national security. That's how they steal corporate secrets.
All right, so Kevin, how does the Trump administration navigate this kind of opposition, particularly from people within the Republican Party?
So it's fascinating because Senator Rubio actually took to the Senate floor last week and slammed this, and he's continuing to do that, as we just saw. I put that very question, Elaine, to some representatives and affiliates of ZTE, and what they feel is going to have to happen is that the president's going to have to say, hey, look, let's look at the collective agreement that we're going to reach with the Chinese in terms of a U.S.-China bilateral talk, and that once it's in the collective, that they would be able to make the case. But this is a tough case for them to make, simply because of people like Senator Rubio who are absolutely slamming this. And we're looking at this tweet, but this settlement that President Trump feels that he was really the one that enacted that settlement that first the Obama administration pushed for. And that was a hefty, hefty settlement. But the ZTE folks, the last point that I would make on this, explained to me that, okay, this is the most important Chinese telecom company in China, and should the U.S. forbid this telecom firm from doing business in the United States, you know, what would the response be from the Chinese on other major U.S. companies that are also looking to get a foothold in China's economy? So this is really where technology, telecommunications, all of the different chips, and the supply chains, especially in Trump country, flyover country, where these factory jobs are so important. ZTE, a lot of these chips are built in these supply chains in Republican-controlled districts. So it's a fascinating global economic issue.
Well, finally, Kevin, President Trump is headed to Nashville for, on Tuesday, it's a campaign-style rally. As everybody turns their attention to the midterms, what can we expect to see from the president in his upcoming trips?
Well, I mean, if there's one thing I remember from covering candidate Donald Trump, Omar, it's that you never know what you're going to get when President Donald Trump is off teleprompter and speaking before a rally. So I think we're going to hear a couple of things. I think that it'll be interesting to see whether or not President Trump echoes what Rudy Giuliani says with regards to the Mueller probe. It'll also be interesting to see what he has to say about North Korea. And finally, what he has to say about immigration and folks within his own party, because we're right around the corner from the midterms now. And this is his Republican Party, whether people like Senator Jeff Flake like it or not.
Midterms are right around the corner. Kevin, buckle up.
Buckle up. I'm ready. We live for this.
We do. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.